guys, it's Kerri-Ann and I am in my art space today. So I'm down in the studio, which is adjoining on the art shop, but of course we are in lockdown part 2, day 2 today, so the shop isn't allowed to open. So all non-essential shops are currently closed, which means obviously I am out of work at the moment, apart from my other job, which is arts and crafts, videos for you guys and blogging and freelance work. So at the moment I am only able to entertain you guys and work on other projects, and obviously doing my studying for my masters as well, so keeping busy with all those sorts of things. But the shop isn't open physically at the moment. Obviously devonartsupplies.co.uk, you can still order online for free local delivery and click and collect and things like that. But in the meantime, keeping positive, as hard as things are and as worrying as things are, I've got my arts and my crafts and my sewing to keep me busy and keep me positive, and I'm hoping that does the same for you too. So with that in mind, I thought I would work on some videos for you. I'm going to start with some watercolour videos for you today, just some simple and quick ideas on how to make some watercolour cards. So the first tutorial I'm going to do for you in this video is going to be on watercolour wreaths, so just some really quick and easy watercolour wreaths that you could then put onto your cards. So they're great fun for all ages and abilities, and I'll show you a few different designs of wreaths that you could make with watercolour. My plans, I'm going to work on a selection of watercolour videos, a selection of sewing videos and card making videos too, so please stay tuned to the channel, follow us, like all the videos, comment as much as you can. All your interaction really helps to keep me busy, but also to fund me during these challenging times where I can't work in the shop. So although you're not physically spending, because my channel is monetized, it means that by watching my videos, liking, commenting, subscribing, that all supports me and helps me out. So thank you in advance for all of that. So let's get started. All of that talk out the way. I'm going to spin you down now so you can see the paper. Okay, let's move the paper slightly here. So for the watercolour wreaths, as I say, really quick and easy tutorial. We're just going to find a circular shape. So the tape roll that I've got here is ideal, so let's not waste too much space on the page. You could use, if you were lucky enough to get the Imagine Design Create circle stencils, those would be perfect, but failing that, just a cheap old roll of tape or plate or mug would be just as good. Now when you've got your circular shape on the page, you want to just do it lightly in a pencil, then we can get moving. So I'm going to use my SAA number 6 round brush today, but obviously any good quality watercolour or general use mixed media brush would be great. I'm using size 6 just because that's the most comfortable one for this particular size of wreath, but if you're doing smaller ones you'll want a smaller brush. If you're doing larger ones then I would probably go for a larger brush. So as I say, this is a really simple project, and all I'm doing is striking in the same direction, keeping those leaves coming round in this way, just moving around. Now can you see I'm not reloading the brush each time? I've done quite a few there with the same brush load, and now I'm going back to reload it up. So I'm using here my SAA colours, and I'm using, let's have a little nosy, olive green and forest green it looks like. Any watercolours will be great. I do love working in the Cotman colours, so if you've got the Cotman watercolours, those are fantastic, but any watercolours that you've got at home will be just as good. So I'm just picking up the paint, loading it onto the brush. I like to twist the brush to load up the watercolour brush, and then I'm just coming round. Now if you prefer, you can actually twist the page around, okay? So if you prefer to keep the brush in the same direction, just twist the page around. Now have you noticed I'm leaving spaces? Now that's because I'm going to come back in with a slightly different shade of the watercolour, and I'm going to fill those gaps with a slightly different shade of the green, just to give it a bit of a blend, a bit of a mix. Now another thing I'm going to say is you don't need these to be perfect, okay? This is just a rough illustration. If you want to make it absolutely perfect, then I'll do some videos on more fine art designs, but these are nice little mixed illustration styles in the loose watercolours that I like working in. So this isn't about perfection, This is about enjoying your time watercolouring. So as you can see, I'm taking a bit more of the olive here, mixing it into the palette. So this is a slightly deeper shade. Then I'm going to clean the brush before moving into the forest green here, and I'm just going to bring that to the side here, and then I'm going to blend the two together, and that's going to create me a nice shade there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back round, filling in these gaps, and because I'm doing it just as they are drying, so they're not completely wet but they're not completely dry, they're going to start merging in places, which is what I want, so that it's got that lovely joined feel. So can you see how they merge slightly? Blending together, so it all comes together. So I'm filling the gaps with the same motion, filling it up. Now of course, with this size wreath here, if you wanted to make it a more luscious filled wreath, then what I would say is you would go for bigger leaves and also a bigger brush. Okay, so but the one we're going to do here, I'm actually going to show you how I do a little design in the centre of the wreath, which is why I've gone for a thinner foliage around the outside. Okay, can you start to see that merging together? I'm just going to need to mix a little bit more of that together to get the shade that I want. There we go, and I'm just going to come back around again. There we go. Filling up those gaps. There we go, so we've got that lovely wreath round there. So hopefully you can see how that has come along. Okay, so there's my little wreath. Let's see the best position to put that in for you. There we go. So now I'm actually going to add some mistletoe into the centre of the wreath. So I'm going back to the olive green here, and I'm loading the brush up with the olive green. Now for this, you need to choose whereabouts you want the top of your wreath to be. Now I'm going to have the top of my wreath up here. I like this bit down here for the bottom. The other point that you could start looking at too is whether you want to add berries around here. Some people might want to add red or white berries, so white for mistletoe, red for the holly, if you want to give the look of holly or mistletoe for your wreath. And you can do that with Nuvo drops, you could do that with watercolour when it's dry though, wait till it's dry, or you could use a different medium to create the dots like pens or glitter pens, things like that, but that's totally your choice. So for the mistletoe, I'm just going to strike the brush in different directions, and then I'm going to pull it very thinly up to the top, and then I'm going to pull back down to give me the next area that I want them to be. And this one here I'm going to pull into there, and I'm just going to pull that down there as well. So as you can see, I'm just creating the look of the mistletoe falling down here, and then I'm going to decide where I want the next one to be, using just the very tip of the brush to drop down. And I haven't reloaded the brush once yet, I'm just using it with what's on there at the moment. I'm going to have another little bit here. And then I think I want some more to come down here. Still haven't reloaded that brush, I'm keeping it so that I'm getting the various shades dropping through. And this is the point where you start to think, right, where else might you want some more of the mistletoe to fall? So I'm going to have a little bit more here. And where else might I want some live here? And this is where I'm just playing around to see where I want to bring the mistletoe down. I'm just going to have another one going through here. Just going to add in a little bit here, and a little bit there, and then I'm just going to pop some leaves around just to fill the gaps a little bit where I want to. So I used just one brush load there of the watercolour, but what I can do, if there's any areas I want to drop some extra back in whilst it's still wet, I can just drop it in just to give some variations of shade. So I'm just dropping it in on the top of where I've painted with the watercolour from before, but remembering that I only loaded the brush once and then used that same watercolour brush load all the way around. Okay, so now is the point where I can change it by adding drops of colour in wherever I want to. Now can you see here I've used the other shade, and this is just to give me some points of difference of the colour green. So where it's gone too dark for what I want, I'm going to lift it back out by using a dry brush and lifting it out. So I've dried off the brush, completely dry, and then I'm lifting the watercolour where I don't want the watercolour to be so dark. So that's lifting. Nice dry brush, lift out where you've got more than you wanted, lifting it out and moving it around. But if you want it completely out, you lift and strike it off onto a piece of tea towel. There we go. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that little wreath there. That would make a nice little Christmas card. I'd probably use my Nuvo drops to add some little berries around, possibly add some around the outside as well. Okay, so that's one quick and easy wreath design that you could use doing watercolour for some Christmas cards. Really quick, really easy, with mistletoe hanging there. So let's have another look at how we can work on a thicker wreath. So if we do one here, we're just going to do around there. And this time we're going to go for a chunkier brush. We're going to go for the 10 this time. So I'm wetting the brush. I'm going to use what's in the palette. I like to use up what's in the palette where I can. So I'm loading the brush up, giving it a few twists. And this time I'm going to have nice, big chunky. So I'm using the same size circle, but straight away this is going to look very different because I'm using a different size brush. Okay, so I'm going to actually add some more colour into this time. A bit more water. Loading the brush up. And it doesn't matter that it's going to vary in shade because I like the change in the colour. I'm trying to keep slight points when I'm using the brush. Okay, doesn't matter if they're not perfect, they don't need to be perfect. Okay, we're going to come back round. We're going to fill up any gaps the next size round. Okay, so now we're going to come back round. We're going to use a different shade mixed in with the green that I used before, and I'm going to come back round again now, and this time I'm coming into the gap. So I'm trying to keep the points further out but let it blend in the centre. Keep the points further out, letting it blend in that centre. Keeping those points, blend in the centre. Keeping the point. There we go. It's just so that then you can see the different leaves on the foliage. So I like to keep the points just a bit further out and let it blend in the middle. Because we're using larger amounts, it's going to blend more than it did with the small, because obviously there's more water on the brush, it takes longer to dry, so it's going to blend wet on wet. Okay, so we've got two different shades of green blending together, coming through round the face. So it's nice and luscious and green. Just going to get to the end there, and then we've got that lovely blend. So whilst this now is drying, okay, so this is where it's drier and it's wet around here, you'll start to see those shades blending together. Now if you feel like you want some extra defined points, then this is a good point to do that. So you could just add them in without blending, or you can add them all the way through, so pulling to that centre. It's completely up to you. This is the stage where you can start playing around and dropping in different shades of green in different areas that you feel it needs it. So I just want a bit more of the olive in here, so that when it moves around and dries, it's a really luscious wreath. So keeping that lovely blend. I like the white parts here. I'm going to leave those white parts alone. I am going to just drop in a bit more of the green on that one. Just remember as well, with watercolour, it's going to dry slightly lighter than when you apply it. So when you're applying your watercolours, just remember that the shade that you're applying is going to go lighter. Okay, so this is the same size wreath as this one here. So we've used the same template circle, but what we've done is we've used a different size brush, a 10 here and a 6 here, and the wreaths look completely different, okay, but we've done the same technique. Now at this point you might want to write Merry Christmas in the centre, you might want to do mistletoe like you've done here, you might want a little robin sat here, but for this particular one I'm going to let it completely dry, and then I'm going to use my Nuvo drops and I'm going to drop them over in a nice bright red. But if you are going to use Nuvo drops on here, please let it solidly dry before you apply anything onto it, because if you're going to add any colour on the top and you do it onto the wet, with Nuvo drops it spreads out, with watercolour it will bleed out, so it will all blend. And if that's the style you want, then fantastic, but if it isn't, then obviously don't go and do that. So let me just tip that one up a bit to make sure you can see how that's coming along. Lovely chunky festive wreath there. Wonderful. So let's have a look at what it will look like if we drop in the colour whilst it's wet. So let's just do a really quick one of those again and drop in some red berries whilst it is still quite wet. So we're doing exactly the same as what we just did before. So I'm going to first of all use the olive green, a bit more water, and I'm just going to really quickly go round. I mean, these, if you were going to do them for original watercolour cards each time, then this is a really quick watercolour project that you could do for people, and you could write their names in the centre maybe, that would be nice and personalised, or you could do different designs in each one. But what you could do is you could do one really special one, photocopy it, print it, obviously scan it, print it, and then you can have your cards printed. So there's lots of different ways in which you can use your watercolour ideas. So I'm loading the brush up, bringing it into this area of paint, and then I'm just going to come into the middle here. So I've got two very defined different colours this time, whereas before I mixed them slightly more so that they would blend. So this is just again to give you a point of difference. Trying to bring those leaves so that you've got that point still, keeping the points further out, blending it in. There we go. So when you overlay and mix them, they blend in all different colours. This is two completely separate shades together. Okay, so they are going to blend in together because we're wet on wet here, but they are, you can see the separation slightly more than you can when I blend the way I did before. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a bit more of the olive, and I'm just going to go back over where I want some more of the strength of that olive colour to come through. And I'm also going to use this opportunity to define anywhere that I want more defined leaf points. Just put them there and there. But other than that, I'm quite happy with how that one's blending together. So I like that one there. So as I say, this is the point in which it's totally wet. If you want to start adding in your red now, you can. But obviously be aware it is going to blend. So all you need to do is load up your brush. Now I'm loading it up with a very strong red. I'm loading it up and I'm going to drop them in. Alright, so just be prepared, they are going to bleed. Alright, but if this is the style that you like, then this is going to be very loose watercolours. There we go. Just going to bring in a few more dots, and then when it dries you'll have a very festive loose watercolour wreath all together. So there we have it. So this one here is the wet on wet, dropping in those berries onto the wet wreath. This one here, I'm leaving it to dry, and then I'm going to put the red berries over the top in a different medium. I'm actually going to use a Nuvo drop, which is the droplets. You could use gems, you could use paint, it's totally up to you. So just see if you can see that one all blending nicely there. So a nice loose watercolour. And then we've got the first one that we did with the mistletoe. There we go. So I hope that was a useful tutorial for you. And obviously I'm going to work on some other designs now, so do subscribe to the channel please, and like and comment on the videos, that'd be fantastic. I hope you're having a good week, and tomorrow is Saturday, so I'll have lots of time again tomorrow to do lots more tutorials for you. Take care everyone, have a great day, bye!